Once again, viewers, hello. Welcome to our continuing transmission of our subjects during this time of coronavirus. We continue transmitting our content, and today I welcome you to English Paper 101. That is a topic in Form 3 and also very important to Form 4s. That is the testing of poetry in Paper 1 in English. When poetry is tested in English, it will be in question 3A. Very relevant to our students in Form 3 and our students in Form 4. When it is tested in question 3A, the following will be expected of a candidate. Number one, the candidate must be aware about the sound devices. So sound the students must be aware about the sound devices that will be found in that particular poem in question 3A. And these sound devices include 1, rhyme. That is similarity of sounds at the end of every line in a poem. So you have to focus at the last words in every line in a poem to see whether there is rhyme. Number 2, you have to look at alliteration. Look at alliteration. In other words, you must be able to see the similarity of consonant sounds at the beginning of a word in a line in poetry. We are going to see examples. Number 3, repetition. Though repetition is not a sound per se, but in a poem, it is taken to be part and parcel of that device that will make a poem musical. So let us look at repetition. And repetition can be one word. Let us look at, is it a repetition of one word? Repetition is a phrase. It can be a phrase. Repetition can be a line. And repetition can be an entire stanza. This is what we are looking at. Repetition, is it one word? Is it a phrase, which is a group of words? Is it a line? Or is it an entire stanza? Number 4, we are focusing on consonants. We are focusing on consonants. And lastly, we are focusing on assonance. Caution to the candidates. Caution to the candidates that unless there is no rhyme, unless there is no alliteration, unless there is no repetition, then this one should always be the last to look at. Many students are going to force a poem to have consonants even when it is not there. They are going to force assonance even when assonance is not there. So let us train ourselves to be looking at rhyme, to be looking at alliteration, to be looking at repetition. A good example is a paper that I have here. This is KCSE sample paper 2018. When we talk about rhyme, for example, I'll only pick the ed words. We are talking of a word like this poem has Fred. This poem has Ed. This poem has for. This poem has grow. I have only picked the first stanza. And I have only picked the last words of each stanza. So you are going to focus on the last sound, end, end. There is a fo, o, and o. When you look at such kind of a poem, you are going to see that there is a clear rhyme. That one is similar. The one that we designate with alphabet A, it is similar with that one. Then this one is similar with the other one. And you are going to see, going downwards, this kind of a poem will have some kind of a pattern. So we are going to realize that this poem, even without looking at the rest of the stanzas, rhyme is there. You don't need to go to consonants. You don't need to go to assonance when you can see rhyme. And if I can read without necessarily writing, the first line says, I was angry with my friend. I was angry with my friend. There is something that I note there. The word was and the word with. The word was and the word with. You are going to note that they have similar consonant sound at the beginning of the word, and they are closer to one another. So we are able to identify alliteration in that poem. If I read further, I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath, comma, my wrath did end. Once again, in line 2, I told my wrath did end. Then there is something that I have noted there, that there is a word that has been repeated there, which is a phrase, my wrath, comma, my wrath. This is a phrase. My wrath, a noun phrase, my wrath, a noun phrase, has been repeated. So, looking further, I'm going to identify repetition in that poem without bothering so much to look at consonants and to look at assonance. Let us train our minds to always be looking at 3 sounds here: rhyme, alliteration, repetition. And I'm definitely sure when such kind of a question is brought in your exams, you'll be able to identify the sound devices. Then, we are also asking ourselves another question. Number B, what is the importance? What is the importance of sound devices? That is a commonly asked question. When that question is brought in paper 1, question 3A, the importance of sound devices. And we must agree, as we have always done, that in paper 1, what is normally asked or what is normally tested is the issue of performance. And that is where we are coming to sound devices. So these sound devices must have the importance. We say, number 1, the sound devices create rhythm. That is importance number 1. This alliteration, this repetition, this rhyme, it creates rhythm. Rhythm is also called music. Also called music. So, when we have sound devices, there is rhythm. And when there is rhythm, there is music. Number 2, anything that is musical, arouses interest. Viewers, you must agree with me that this time of coronavirus scourge, the government was very quick to go and shut down the disco, the halls, where people go to entertain themselves. And one form of entertainment is music. And we are going to see hundreds of them gathered there for that particular song because it is arousing interest. And anything that arouses interest, number 3, is memorable. Anything that arouses interest is memorable. We only remember in life those things that have a very big impact in our mind. And anything that has big impact in our mind is something that we are going to remember, and it is something that is memorable. So when we are asked about the importance of sound devices, we are going to say sound devices are therefore musicality. Sound devices arouses interest, and sound devices bring about memorability. Those are the 3 things that we consider as importance of sound devices. Number C, you are going to find out some questions that are phrased as this: how has rhythm been achieved? In other words, you are being asked, look at sound devices that are in that particular poem. But I must caution you that it is not all poems that you are going to see these sound devices. We have a unique category of poems that are called oral poems. Oral poems. We have conventional poems that are divided in stanzas. Maybe one stanza has 4 lines, a stanza has 6 lines, and we have that kind of conventionality. But you are going to encounter some forms of poems that we refer to as what? Oral poems. These are poems that have been translated from one language to the other, from one ethnic group to another. And when such poetry has been translated, you are not likely to see some sound devices here. You are not likely to see alliteration. You are not likely to see rhyme. The only thing that is likely to be retained is repetition. So a question can be asked from an oral poem. What makes the above poem easy to remember? I.e., what makes the poem easy to remember? And that one is a very common question. Very common question that we find in some question papers. What makes a poem easy to remember? And what we are talking about is, if we do not have these sound devices, then is there a possibility that we are going to remember this particular poem? And the question we are talking about is yes. What makes an old poem memorable would be, for example, though it may not be in all poems, but in certain poems, look for these general characteristics. Number 1, is there repetition? If repetition is there, then don't hesitate to put it down as an answer. Number two, look for conversational technique. Look for conversational technique in that particular poem. What is the meaning of conversational technique? It comes from the word conversation. And conversational techniques will manifest itself in 2 ways. Number 1, is there dialogue? So it will manifest itself in the form of a dialogue. Number 2, is there direct address? This one is called conversational technique, where the persona is engaged in a dialogue with another character or 2 characters. There is interlocution between 2 or more. In direct address, the persona is directly addressing somebody that we do not even see, or can be there, but we do not see any response from them. That is conversational technique. Look for that in a poem, and then you are going to find out whether it is making the poem memorable. In other genres of poems, you are going to find out that there will be a lot of rhetorical questions. Rhetorical questions. Some poems, especially those that are raising very critical and very serious matters in society, are going to employ rhetorical questions because they are provoking your mind to think about the issues that the poet has raised. So check that poem. Does it have rhetorical question? And then it will be part of the answer as to why there is memorability in that particular poem. Number D, I want you to focus on the length of the lines. The length of the line can make a poem memorable. Extremely short lines will elicit some interest in your mind, and then memorability will be obvious. We are talking of short lines or a mixture of short and long, a mixture of short and long lines. That one will make it memorable. This mixture, it is juxtaposed with a long line, a short line, a long line, a short line, long line, a short line. Then that is memorability. Number E, as is common with all translated genres in oral literature, when you translate one to another, there are certain words that you cannot translate. So they are going to be retained as they were. There is use of local idiom. That is where we are heading to. Use of local idiom. Look at most of the poems from Western Africa. When they have been translated, they do not have equivalents in the language of translation. So some idioms are going to be retained, and those are local idioms. So we are going to remember those poems because they had those local idioms. Number F. We are going to look at imagery. Does such a poem employ imagery? And I am particularly focusing myself on the use of similes and metaphors. Some poems are going to use very strong and powerful similes and metaphors, and such powerful similes and metaphors will not escape your mind, and it will make the poem memorable. Another question that is commonly asked in a poem when it is tested in English, paper 101, question 3A, is about performance. How do you perform? Number G. How do you perform? Line 5 of the poem. That question is very common. How do you perform line 5 of the poem? And I'm going to give an example here. Though that one is a particularly long line, imagine you have a poem and then you encounter this line. Along the road she ran, flowers on her hand. And then you are being asked, how do you perform line 5 of the poem? This is line 5 of the poem. Number 1, verbal. We have to answer it at 2 levels. Verbal. Verbal has to do with anytime we are performing, are we raising our voice? Are we lowering our voice? So here we are saying we are going to raise our voice. When you are having this kind of a line, along the road she ran, flowers on her hand. The meaning has been brought out by only one word, that is flowers. And then the running, that is the running. Along the road she ran, flowers on her hand. The idea of flowers here brings out an idea of excitement. There is some joy. So, whenever there is some joy, we are going to raise our voice to show excitement. To show excitement. Then, stage number 2, non-verbal. Non-verbal. Dear students, we must remind ourselves that we have 5 non-verbal cues. Number 1, gestures. That is the use of hands. You have facial expression. The way you use your face to communicate, that is number 2. You have body movement. The rest of the body, apart from the hands and the face, will be body movement. Then you have tone of variation. Along the road she ran, that variation of tone. And lastly, dramatic pause. Those are the 5. So when you have come here and you have said non-verbal, then you have to ask yourself, among the 5, which one is the most relevant? Let us go back to our line here. Along the road she ran. Focus on this word. Focus on the word ran. Then you are going to say body movement. Here, that is body movement. body movement. Because of the running, you are going to demonstrate that one by use of your legs. Non-verbal body movement. I will use my legs to show running. Full stop. So my emphasis here is, when you are answering this question, it will never be right unless you write the word verbal, unless you write the word non-verbal. When this one is absent, as the one who is marking your exam, I'll just come and cancel it out. So it must be introduced by this verbal and then non-verbal. And that is very important for you to understand this particular aspect. The same question can be asked, how do you say? Either perform or say. The two words are taken to be the same. How do you say? How do you perform a certain line in poetry? So the answering will be the same. Another commonly asked question, which is the last one in our discussion today, number I, which words do you stress in the last line of the poem? Once again, 2 marks. It is another question that is focused on, once again, performance. Which words do you stress in the last line of the poem? And the key word here is stress, and then last line. Let us create a line. That is our last line in our poem of discussion. In the cliff, the body rolled. Let us assume that that is our last line in the poem. And then you are asked, which words do you stress in the last line of the poem? And this is the last line of the poem. We must note that we always stress the content words. Content words in a line in poetry. So it must be conscious in your minds that the last, or this last one, the words that you are going to stress are the ones that we are referring to as the content words. But we must ask ourselves, what are content words? Content words include, we are talking of nouns, we are talking of pronouns, we are talking of main verbs. Main verbs. We are talking over adjectives. We are talking over adverbs. These are the content words. And it must be borne in mind that content words are also called meaning words, the words that carry the meaning in that sentence. Then you just come and then you do through elimination. In is a preposition. We never stress a preposition. We never stress a determiner. This one is a noun. Once again, this one is an article. And this one is a noun. And this one is a verb. So your answer will be cliff, body, and rolled as the words that we stress. Sometimes this question is phrased. Which words do you stress in the last line of the poem and why? The answer is always simple. Identify the words cliff, body, and rolled, and then put it simple that they are content words. Once again, they are stressed because they are content words. So, in our lesson today, we have looked at a poem when it is tested in question 3A. And specifically, we have looked at sound devices and some other areas that are commonly tested. Later on, in our similar transmissions, we shall be looking at a poem in terms of how do you prepare for a performance and how do you perform that particular poem. And with that, we have come to the end of our transmission today in our English lesson. I'm hoping to see you next time, and it is goodbye.